Okay, I think we are live. Well, hey, good evening, everybody. This is Patrick Millikin from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I'm really delighted to be interviewing our good friend Mike Lupica, who's done numerous events with us in the past, but I think this is the first where I've ever had the opportunity to talk to you myself. So I'm really excited about that, Mike. Always
Patrick,
great to see you.
it's great to be back with you. I'm sorry that I screwed it up and I wasn't there for an in-person event. So now I think I owe you two now. So, because it's never a hardship for me to go to Scottsdale, Arizona, believe me.
Well, in August / early September is probably not the best time to be here. In the spring, right around spring training, that would be perfect timing.
All right, so I'll be back for Spencer. I am now working
Excellent.
on my first Spencer novel, so I'm that's the granddaddy of them all. So I'm pretty fired up for that too.
I'll bet, yeah. Well, for everybody who's kind of been living under a rock, let me read. I got to say your bio needs updating. We have to talk to your publisher about this. Mike Lupica is a prominent sports journalist and the New York Times bestselling author of more than 40 works of fiction and nonfiction. He's a longtime friend to Robert B. Parker, who we'll talk about that a little bit and get into that. And he was selected by the Parker estate to continue the Sonny Randall and the Jesse Stone series, and now the Spencer series. And so just some housekeeping to date, you've done 4 Sonny Randalls, right?
Yeah.
And then let's see, the most recent being a Revenge Tour.
Last May. Yeah.
Still have a few signed copies. And then this is your 3rd Jesse.
Yeah, Fool's Paradise, Stone's Throw, and now Fallout.
And now Fallout. And so going forward, Ace Atkins was doing the Spencer novels for the last 10, I think, and did a superb job. He's moved on now, and you're picking up the mantle on Spencer. And then I understand that Allison Galen is going to be doing Sonny Randall.
Yeah, we did pretty well too. That's if you're going to hand the ball off, Allison Galen is a superb writer.
Fantastic.
And I can't wait to see what she's going to do with and it's funny. Everybody, Ivan Held, my boss, and Danielle Dietrich, my editor at Putnam. I'm going to miss Sonny. I had a blast. I told you it was quite random. And we are going to get to Fallout, folks. I promise. It was quite random how I fell into this, and I think you know the story, but it's such a good story.
Yeah, please.
It's like standing on a street corner and getting hit by lightning, but in a good way. My daughter rides, and I was on my way to Vermont. We were going to rent a house for a couple of weeks, and there's this big show up there, and I'm listening to Kate Burton do an old Sonny Randall, because I was always either rereading Bob Parker's books or James Naughton is now again doing the Jesse Stones, and he's unbelievable. And Joe Mantegna has been unbelievable as Spencer, but Kate Burton is great. And so when I get up there, I call Esther Newberg, literary agent to the Stars, and I said, I'm just curious, Spencer got continued, Jesse got continued, the Westerns got continued by Robert Knott. I said, how come nobody ever continued Sonny Randall? And she said, you know what, I'll find out. So she calls Ivan Held, the capo di tutti capo, as I call him at Putnam. And she calls back an hour later, and she said, Ivan would like you to write a sample chapter. And I said, no. I have enough to do. I wasn't pitching myself to write Sonny Randall. She said, Michael, write the chapter. I get up the next morning and I write about 10 pages. I write longhand before I type. It's the Elmore Leonard School of Longhand Writing. And I type it up. I send it to Esther, who sends it to Ivan, and I am that quickly and that randomly in what Ace Atkins called the Parker sphere. And what I wrote that day, sitting at the dining room table in this rented house in Vermont, is pretty much what became the first chapter of my first Sonny Randall, and it's a scene with Sonny and Spike, and she asks him if he thinks she's getting older, and he said that's a trap, and she said, no, the UPS kid mammed me the other day, and Spike said, well, I assume you shot him. And Patrick, from that, literally from
You
that
had the
age
voice.
on, I knew I was where I belonged. I had Robert B. Parker's voice inside my head from the time I read the God Wolf manuscript when I was a kid. And it's, fortunately, if anybody who's read my newspaper column especially knows that we have similar voices. Okay. I'm not saying that I would never compare myself to him, but one of the wonderful things about the way these books have been received, and again, this is 7 books, and Patrick, all the reviews are the same. All the reader reviews are the same, that this is the way these books are supposed to sound, the way they're supposed to feel. And I believe, having been his friend, I think he would be quite happy with what I've done with these.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thinking about it, and I'll ask you about your friendship with him, but it seems to me that reading these books, it really is like spending time with old friends.
Yeah.
And I love the way, there's so many subtleties to the way, Parker made it look so easy.
Oh,
right. And I really admire the way you've done kind of, the first body doesn't show up until chapter 4. Okay. And so what's so great about the Parker style is that he kind of ambles in, and gives you, you get to spend time with the characters that you know so well, see what's going on for a few chapters, before you really get to the plot. And not too many authors can pull that off and keep the reader's interest that way.
Well, here's the thing. And that, first of all, he was able to carry that off because he had supreme confidence in himself and in his own storytelling ability. I can only wish I were that confident, but I don't, and none of these books, so I feel like I grab you by the front of the shirt. I mean, this book starts with Jesse and Suit watching a high school baseball game, and everybody knows Jesse had a failed baseball career because of an injury, and they are watching Suit's nephew, the star shortstop of the Paradise High School baseball team, and one that Jesse has been mentoring a little bit in baseball, because he still loves the game. And so, I think there's a line, I'm paraphrasing myself, where Suit asks him, do you miss baseball? And he says, only when it's light out, and so now we've gotten back into that world. Here's Suit again. And we've talked about this before, about these books. Plot is obviously important. Plot keeps people turning the pages. But you have got to want to hang around with these people like old friends for 350 pages. You just, and it's Molly, and it's Suit, and it's Daisy Dyke. And it's I even throw in Richie Burke, Sonny Randall's ex-husband, and Spike, because Spike from the jump with me was not only a dream character that he created, but one that I actually thought was underutilized, because I turned him into like this gay superhero, and so, yeah. And then, the one thing I started in the last book, especially, I wanted Jesse to have a hawk, nobody could ever measure up to Hawk. Okay. Hawk is the greatest wingman in history, even though, Hawk would be resistant to the idea that he's anybody's wingman. Okay. Yeah. He's 1A and Spencer's one.
He would say Spencer's the wingman.
Oh no, 100%. I think there's a line in The Last Sonny, because I bring Spencer and Hawk into Revenge Tour, right, where he says, well, I thought you were the sidekick. Wait, I thought you were the sidekick. But Wilson Cromartie,
yep.
I brought him back, and he has been an incredibly fun character to write, and
he really steals the scenes that he's in.
Yeah, doesn't he? And here's the thing: this is a spoiler alert, but yeah, Crow's in the book. He doesn't show up right away, but he kind
Like
of
the fourth act, he kind of comes in.
when he does show up, it's a rock'em sock'em appearance, and we even give Jesse a new love interest in this book because he always has kind of been catnip to the ladies, and so I thought
There are a couple of people kind of hovering around him, circling him in this book.
always like always, and well, as you know, what we revisit in Fallout is the history that Molly Crane and Crow have, and the one thing I did a series of Facebook posts today about the book that were posted at Mr. Parker's Facebook page, and you can see by my third, Jesse, how much respect I have for the character Molly Crane. Listen, you know, I've got a great wife and I've got a great daughter in addition to 3 sons. So if I don't write strong female characters, Patrick, my life at home becomes extremely difficult. It becomes extremely difficult. And Molly is somebody who, if it wasn't Paradise and Jesse wasn't there, she'd be the chief of police.
Absolutely,
because she's a great cop.
And these are even though it's a Jesse Stone novel, this is very much an ensemble cast.
Yeah.
Everybody's plays a very important role in these stories.
Yeah. Listen, I again, Jesse's sure enough of himself that he delegates. He's not a great delegator, because he's always got his hands on. And again, there are, we're having fun talking about this story, but as you know, there are 2 extremely tragic deaths by, I don't know, chapter 6, the one following another. And so this is serious stuff going on in this book. And this is, the 2 deaths are extremely personal with Jesse, but most crime that's committed in Paradise, Massachusetts is. And one thing I try to do, Patrick, is get the police stuff right. And my mom and dad live in Nashua, New Hampshire, and up the street is a dear family friend of ours named Captain John Fisher, who's the chief of police in Carlisle, Mass. It's about a half hour away. And I was back for a visit one time early on, I think right when I was starting to write Jesse.
Did you say Carlisle?
Carlisle, Mass.
I was wondering where the name, maybe that's a nice nod in the name.
Kinda, just look at you.
Sorry, folks. Didn't mean to interrupt.
We're literally talking inside baseball here because one of the main characters in the book, briefly, is named Jack Carlisle. But I'm describing Jesse Stone and this character that I've now been entrusted with writing. And I said, I'm going to need some help. And I literally looked across our living room and I said, yeah, he's a small town police chief. And you're a small town police chief. And so Captain Fisher has been extremely helpful in just the procedural stuff. Because mostly my experience with the law was I tried very hard not to break it. And so he's been, this is all the stuff that goes on is extremely grounded in reality.
Right. Before we get too far, I just want to tell everybody that's watching, I'm kind of flying solo here tonight. And so I'm not typing in like I usually do. But if you have questions for Mike, go ahead and put them in the comments field on Facebook or on YouTube. And I am kind of watching. So towards the end of the hour, I'll go ahead and ask some of your questions. But and also we do have a dwindling number of signed copies of this wonderful book. This is my my little commercial spiel. So here we go. And I'm sure Mike would be happy to sign some more if we sell out too. So
well, the boss told me that I think we're missing a box.
We were missing 12, but
I said, Barbara, I swear I signed everything that was sent to me. So somewhere in the ethosphere or somewhere it'll show up. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you, just as we get into this is, the world of, Jesse Stone and Sonny Randall is kind of intermingled in a sense, you know. Talk about now you're going, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but you're going into Spencer's world, which is a very different world in a way. Paradise is a very, kind of a small town, Hamlet, and in some ways kind of a parochial environment where everybody, it reminded me in some ways of a small Southern town, but I know that the small New England town has its own vibe too, where everybody knows each other's business, and it can be wonderfully supportive, but also too close and insular. I don't know. Talk about a little bit about the challenges of both worlds and how different they are to write about.
Well, it's funny you asked me about that, because one of the posts I did today, and I would quote it, but it's not important to quote. The first time that I saw Bob bring one of the characters from one book into another, the first time I remember, is in Backstory, which is one of my favorite Spencers. It's one of my favorite Spencers, and it involves a bank robbery in the past during the radical days in Boston. And Paul Giacomins, then a friend of his, asked Spencer to find out who killed her mother during this robbery. And the story ends up going to Paradise briefly. And the gangster's daughter, Sonny Karnofsky's daughter, was part of this gang. And she's living the life in Paradise.
I'll be darned.
And
I forgot about that or missed it.
Yeah, I could find it, but and Jesse shows up in a scene where Spencer and Hawk are sitting in their car on the beach looking at this house. And all of a sudden, it's so funny. People have this idea of Tom Selleck as Jesse Stone. It's not the physical description that Mr. Parker himself. He said he looked like a middleweight boxer, and he just asks them what they're doing, and they're impressed that they've already been made. They've only been there for a few hours, sitting in the car. And there's a little back and forth, but Spencer kind of says that this was no ordinary small town cop. And that, to me, it was such a cool blueprint of how you could kind of cross-pollinate these books. So you've seen Sonny and Jesse are in these books, and Vinnie Morris is in both, and Susan Silverman is Sonny's therapist. And it goes like that because, again, you're right. It's a repertory theater of these amazing characters that Robert B. Parker created. And I just wasn't going to be bound to keeping the characters of one book just to that book. So I keep throwing them in. I mean, Tony Marcus keeps popping up all the time in these books, and it's like I can't keep him out of them, because once he shows up, he is one of the great scene stealers of all time. And so even though he's a bad guy, he's kind of an old friend too. And I wasn't just going to leave him in the bullpen. I was going to bring him in. Yeah.
And these characters too, I was just thinking about their enduring appeal to us. They're almost, we both know that Bob Parker was drawing upon classical archetypes when he came up. He was, Spencer, of course, the Fairy Queen, and he was a huge Raymond Chandler fan. And I think didn't he write his doctoral dissertation on?
And then wrote two Marlowe novels. Later on.
Right. Yeah. Right. Now, do you think that, part of the reason we're attracted to these characters is because they follow a kind of code in some way?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah. No. It's the code of the knight errant. And
the Western hero in some ways.
Yeah, no, it's from reading, especially the Spencer books, there's so often a high noon quality. There's a showdown of some kind. I mean, there's a showdown in this book that's quite dramatic, and I hope quite surprising to the readers. But yeah, no, it's that code, and they don't shift the goalposts on their morality, but there's certain lines that they won't cross. And so Jesse is quite comfortable having a friendship with Crow, even though when we first met Crow in Jesse Stone novel, I think it was I forget which one it was, Trouble in Paradise. I may be wrong. He's in a powerboat. You know, they've held Styles Island hostage. People have gotten killed, and he goes off with the money. And then later on, they kind of rehabilitate their relationship. And so he, you know, and when we first met Hawk in Promised Land, Hawk was a bad guy. I mean, Hawk was the muscle for a very bad guy. And then, you know, obviously the relationship that evolved between the two of those is, I mean, they'd be resistant to hearing it described as one of the great love stories of all time. And
Right.
and so they will, their code might be not an entirely completely moral code,
Right.
but they're getting to a place that they think is virtuous and honorable and right and true. Not to go all Hemingway on you, but and it makes them fun to write, because there are some dark shadings to Spencer. There are dark shadings to Jesse.
Well, you know, I was thinking about this too. There's a really, you had this really neat detail. I wrote down these disconnected notes, but yeah, you know, we talked a little bit about how Jesse's always has a circle of women trying to get to him, and you wrote, you know, I think it was I can't remember who says the line. Maybe it was Molly, who said, you know, what he loved more than anything was being a cop. You know, and that line reminded me of Dashiell Hammett a lot, you know, because, you know, Hammett, Sam Spade, his first obligation was to the job, you know.
Right.
And so, you know, yes, there was a code there, but the code was malleable in a way.
Yes.
Morality could be shifted slightly to
Yes.
achieve the end, whereas in Raymond Chandler's world, it was a little bit different, you know. So very interesting.
No, and it's Spencer has said more than once, why do you do this kind of work? And he says, because I'm good at it. You know, he's good at it, and he loves the work. And it's you know, Jesse, when he was in the throes of alcoholism, when his marriage was breaking up, all he really had to fall back on was being a cop. And there are people that he loves and care about in these books and in this town. You know, Suit is like a son to him. Molly's like a sister. There was never any hint of romance for the two of them. And I mean,
Charlie Farrell.
And we introduced a really kind of cool character in this book, a retired elderly former police chief in Paradise named Charlie Farrell, who has become like a father figure to
Did
Jesse.
he not appear in any previous books?
No. He's absolutely. I'll tell you why you think you might think
it feels like he did.
Well, I'll tell you why. Because a lot of his personality reminds you of Phil Randall, Sonny Randall's father in the books.
Maybe that is it. Yeah.
Kind of an impish, smart ass,
cantankerous, ice cream eating. You know.
Yeah, and you know, we know a little bit about Jesse's dad, but not a lot. So Charlie becomes a father figure to him. Jesse's kind of a father figure to Suit. There's a search for family in these books, you know, and one of the things that Molly struggles with is an empty nest and a husband who's away a lot. So these are really fun, complicated characters. There are no one-dimensional, at least not in my hands, and I hope not, one-dimensional characters in these books.
And you know, as you say, if memory serves, Jesse's father was killed on the job, right? In the LAPD. Yeah.
And he talks about how, you know, the only way you deal with that is you go to work. and yeah, it's
And then what I thought was just really surprising in a great way was Farrell's son, Nicholas. What a surprise.
yeah, being in a wheelchair, and
Yeah,
we have yeah, it's an interesting
complicated
there's
character.
an interesting subplot in this book. There's a chocolate company that has moved
Yes.
to Paradise, and a lot of the people who have been hired are people with disabilities. And I just thought it added a layer of reality to a modern company. And then, of course,
Things get
bad things
complicated.
happen at the Patrick.
I know.
Bad stuff happens at the chocolate company.
It's like Willy Wonka's nightmare. And
Yeah,
Hillary Moore, great character. But again, we don't want to get into spoiler territory here.
No.
But this book has a lot of real surprising twists to it. I really admire how you pulled everything off. And I wanted to ask you, well, there's so much. I have just all these crazy ass notes.
Good. Ask away. Where are we going?
I wanted to ask you some of my favorite scenes. Jesse Stone needs somebody to talk to,
Yeah.
and you hear about, with cops, who have, let's face it, seen things that a lot of us have never seen and can't unsee, and so there's a character named Dix in the book. And some of those scenes where they were talking, really wonderful. Can you talk about that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, Dix is also an ex-cop. He is a recovering alcoholic himself, and physically, he doesn't look like the character, the actor I'm going to talk about. But one of the great things in the Tom Selleck Jesse television movies was William Devane, who is just, to my mind, one of the great actors on the planet, was Dix. And so, even though Dix is bald as a billiard ball, and incredibly meticulous with manicured hands and pressed white shirts, I can still hear Devane talking in these sessions. And Dix is to Jesse as Susan Silverman is just as a therapist to Sonny Randall. And the back and forth between them is one of the most fun parts of writing this character, because you're right. They talk in a cop shorthand. Okay. They both seen things. They come from each other's worlds. And
they have an understanding.
Yeah. It's like one of my great newspaper editors at the Daily News was once talking about when we'd be kicking around column ideas or kicking around how to get at a column. And he once said to me, you notice that the only thing we don't talk about anything that's not about the column. And so you strip away, there's not a lot of small talk between Dix and Jesse. Jesse often goes there when he's stuck in a case and knows that Dix is an unbelievably great sounding board.
And a therapist.
Yeah, no, he's, and there's, again, I don't want to get into spoiler alert territory, but the bottle is always the elephant in the room with Jesse. That the drink that'll send him careening back down the rabbit hole. It's, any recovering alcoholic will tell you, you're one drink away.
Right.
So.
What does Dix call them? The Two Dead Drunks Society or something like that?
Yeah. It's actually, I stole that from my dear late mentor friend, Pete Hamill, who,
oh, wow.
And he used to talk about, ex-drinkers. And he said, it's not the Dead Poets Society, it's the Dead Drunk Society. And
he was a mentor to you?
Oh my God. He was one of my dearest friends.
Oh my gosh.
I knew him throughout my newspaper career. He was at my wedding. I was at his wedding. When I branched out from sports and started writing in the front of the paper, he was always my unindicted co-conspirator. I would always, he was my Dix. He was not only this towering talent, maybe the poet laureate of New York City in all the years that he was writing about the city. But he was the most kind, gentle, generous person. We lost him a couple of years ago.
Right.
And
He was like the Joseph Mitchell of his era.
oh my God, Patrick, if you haven't seen it, and anybody watching us tonight hasn't seen it,
Drinking
go and watch the HBO documentary about Jimmy Breslin and Pete Hamill called Deadline Artists. It won an Emmy. It is a love letter to a bygone day of New York newspapers, of which I was a part. And no, when I started the Daily News as a kid, down the hall from me, there were the two guys who made me want to come to New York and write a newspaper column. Breslin was over here, Pete was over here, Anne Marie Caggiano, like Switzerland, was between them. And I could just walk down the hall anytime I wanted, and there'd be cigar smoke on Breslin's side of the office, cigarette smoke on, and as I described it when I wrote about Pete's death, all this magic in between them. Oh no, Pete was, yeah, he was all that.
That's, one of the, not to talk about myself, but being in this field, the book field, for this particular length of time. I mean, for me, it's been almost, I don't know, 30 years since I first, well, 93, I guess, when I first started working in bookstores, and then 95, Poison Pen. So, but in that chunk of time, the amount of legends, that I have been fortunate enough to meet, like people I'm sure you knew, like Donald Westlake and Ed McBain and, Tony Hillerman, James Crumley, all these amazing writers.
Yeah, you'd call them Mount Rushmore guys, except the guys we're talking about, we need way more than 4 faces and 4 names to make a proper Mount Rushmore. And Parker used to come. I assume Elmore Leonard came. I mean,
yeah, of course. I met Dutch Leonard.
The best, the coolest guy in the room. I met him. We always digress. I'm out of my lane again.
That's okay.
But I've been so lucky to meet my heroes. And I got a call from Esquire magazine, and they said, "You probably don't want to do this, but you've written a couple of mysteries now." That's what I was writing about, Peter Finley,
right.
And would you be interested in writing a feature about Elmore Leonard? And I said, yes, I would, because it wasn't the writing of the feature. I was going to just get to go and meet him and hang out with him. And
when would this have been?
It was in the late 80s. It was not long after he'd hit, where he was on the cover of Newsweek and
Shorty that time.
Yeah. And so I flew out to Detroit, and we spent like 3 days together, and it began a friendship that lasted until the day he died. And when I would be on book tours for my children's books, I would always make them send me through Detroit, because it would give me a chance to go hang with Dutch for a couple of days. And even at the end of his life, once you were at the house and saw the table in the living room where he wrote, and you tried not to get killed by secondary smoke, he would sit down at 9 o'clock in the morning and write until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And there would be days when I'd be writing on a book, and I was thinking, I'm going to call it a day. And then I would think, you know what? There's an 85-year-old guy in Birmingham, Michigan, who's still writing away. And if he can, I can. And I would call Patrick, I would call him up about 4, and I'd say, "Are you writing or thinking about girls?" And he'd always giggle, and he'd say, "What, you can't do both?" And then he'd start reading to me whatever he'd written that day. And I'm thinking,
oh
I am the luckiest person. Wow. And he'd be talking in attitudes and accents and all of this stuff. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is
what a
way
gift.
Cool. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, since we brought it up at the beginning, tell me about your friendship with Bob Parker. How did you first meet him? And
I wrote, I met him when I was doing some work for PBS. I was doing some essays and features for PBS, and they wanted a piece about the Red Sox Yankees rivalry. And I went up to Boston, and I went to the famous house where he had one floor and Joan had the other, and then they had their common area. And we shot an interview about the Red Sox, and he was, of course, smart and funny and you know, a lot bitchier about the Red Sox in those days than he would have been, you know, in when his team started winning World Series.
Right.
And we just hit it off, and then you know, we'd see each other on book tours, you know, but his were a lot more elaborate and more important than mine. But I don't know if I ever told you the story. One day I'm in Georgetown, and I'm there. I forget what book I was. It was before I started writing kids' books, and it might have been one of the sports novels, Bump and Run, or one of those. And so we run into each other in the lobby of the Four Seasons Hotel in Georgetown. And he says, "Mikey, let's have dinner." He called me Mikey. I said, "Done." I said, "My appearance is going to be over at 7:30. And when's yours?" He said, "Well, I assume it was politics and prose." And he said, "I'm going from 7 to 8. And I said, "Well, okay, I'll make a reservation in the restaurant back here. What time should I make it?" And he goes, 8:15. I said, "Bob, you're not going to, you know, there's probably going to be long lines, and how do you know you'll get back in time?" He said, "Mikey, let me explain something to you. When it hits 8 o'clock, if I'm writing my name and I have only gotten as far as Robert B., I'm out of there." And sure enough, he came walking back. One of our other favorite lines is, he told somebody one time, somebody asked him if they would blurb a book. And he'd say, "Sure." And when he blurbed it, they said, "Well, what'd you think?" And he said, I'll blurb them or I'll read them, but I'm not doing both."
That's so funny, because I remember I heard that too. And I remember once when he was here a long time ago, there was a paperback of Don Winslow, you know, Don Winslow's first novel, Cool Breeze on the Underground.
Yeah.
It had a big quote by Bob Parker on the front. And I remember, and I just read it. "Oh, that's a great book." And I mentioned it to Bob, and he's like, "Yeah, never heard of the guy." And he's got his blurb on the front. It was great.
I know. And
it was great.
And then later, in his later years, it was mostly a lot of baseball emails during the baseball season, and all of his pain about the Red Sox until then 2004 happens, and then 2007 happens. So he got to see, he died in 2011. So he got to see two. He got to see two World Series before he died. And I think I've talked about this with you and Barbara before. The day I found out that he died, at his desk in this incredibly, almost moving way. Joan had gone out for a walk. She came back and she found him. I felt the same way I did when I found out Will Chamberlain had died. I mean, he was like Superman. I mean, he was the most prolific guy. It's why I never apologize for writing a lot of books, because if it didn't bother him to be working all the time, and by the way, I have no other skills, so I have nothing to fall back on. So this is it. The book writing thing goes south, I'm screwed. But no, it was like Mike Barnacle called me from Boston. He said, "Bob Parker died." I said, "No, come on." He was, he's 77 or 78 years old at the time. And little did I know that within 7 or 8 years, I would have the high honor of writing some of these characters. And again, I'm repeating myself, but I believe he would. I think he'd be pleased with what he's seen from Sonny and Jesse, and I think he'd be pleased that I'm going to take a big old swing at Spencer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't want to. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention. One of the things that comes up in this book is that the pandemic is in the background. And,
yeah.
How did you decide to do that, and maybe tell us about how you approached it?
I there are probably going to be great novels written about COVID.
Yeah,
I wasn't going to be the guy to write them.
right.
It just,
We're all
to
so
me,
exhausted by it.
yeah, it was. But the funny thing is, people during COVID were saying, "How's it affected your life?" And I said, "My life is pretty much the same. I go up and I write, and when I'm done, I come down. And as always, as my wife knows, once I get out of this room, Patrick, and away from this table, life becomes extremely challenging for me. It's one of the reasons why Jim Patterson and I get along so well. We like to play golf. We like to be at the writing table, and we like to be with our wives. But simple tasks can be difficult. So I again, I've showed you this before. I write on these kinds of pads, then I type them up, and I'm happy when these, as Elmore Leonard say, get the characters talking, and things will develop. And I'm so pleased you like the plot of Fallout, because I never think of myself as a great plotter. I kind of feel like I try to outline. I try to be a good boy. I try to outline these books, but it's very difficult. The characters start doing things, and I go off.
Yeah, because they're so character driven.
Yeah,
Seems to me,
yeah.
and dialogue driven.
Well, yeah, I take pride in that. I do, and again, I just think readers like listening to these people talk. I mean, and again, I could list them all, and it's just so much fun, from Jesse, the Sonny, to Spike, to Sonny's dad, to Richie Burke, to these old gangsters like Richie Burke's father. Vinnie Morris to me was always a scream. I have to sometimes resist finding ways to get him into these books, because Vinnie Morris just always made me laugh. And this kind of meticulously neat shooter, and
Right.
Spencer loved him, and now he's kind of gotten into Jesse's world, and again, I like being with these people. I hope the readers like being with these people, because you can see how much these people like being with each other.
Absolutely.
In these books,
Yeah. I've asked Ace this. Is there kind of an informal Bible to Bob's world that you kind of have to adhere to?
I've already a couple of times, he'll say, I've emailed Ace and said, "Tell me again what Martin Quirk's current job is." It's like that,
Right.
and I'll say, Jackie DeMarco, dead or alive? And then, this will inquire, this. So if I'm uncertain, they don't make the cut. Okay. But yeah, I did. I literally sent Ace, and Ace has been great. I sent him an email. And I said, "Is Quirk still retired?" He goes, "No, he's out of retirement." And we, of course, we talk about them like they're real people, because they are real people to us,
That's right. That's right. Do you have a favorite era of the Spencer novels?
I have to tell you, I go back, and the early one, Mortal Stakes, because it was set with the Red Sox. I love that book, and the Catskill Eagle, and that was such a dark story about when Susan goes off with another guy, and there's a scene in that San Francisco book where Spencer kills a pimp to save two hookers, and he basically kills them in cold blood. And it's a seminal moment that haunts him through that book and that breakup with him and Susan. But then I go back. I'll tell you my favorite, and one I literally have read 5 times if I read it once, is Cold Service. Cold Service is the Marshport novel, and Boots Podolak, and Jesse excuse me, Spencer and Hawk cleaning up the town. That is one of my favorites. Backstory is one of my favorites because
That's
I
fairly late too. That's
no, and
early
Six Kill,
2000s or
Six Kill was the last Spencer that Bob wrote, and
right.
about the the overweight movie star and all that stuff, and he introduces Zebulon Six Kill, and I honestly think that as much as I fell in love with those books as a kid from New England, and I can tell you, I bought the Godwolf manuscript in paperback in an old Brentano's on Boylston Street in Boston. And I finished it and I said, holy crap, this is what I want to do. I want to write this kind of book. And then, on it went. And then came Promised Land, and then came Mortal Stakes. And
Did you ever read his it was that epic kind of Irish
All Our
family.
Yesterdays?
Yeah.
Oh no, the big epic Irish. Oh no,
Yeah.
there's
Fantastic.
nothing he wrote that I didn't read. And
Westerns were great.
Huh?
The
Oh,
Westerns
Westerns
were
were great. Yeah, again, it's like he got inside my head and my heart when I was a teenager, and he never got out. And so this transition, and the other thing, people said, weren't you intimidated? And I have to tell you, I wasn't. I just felt like I just felt like so connected to this world. I'd always felt so connected to this world. You can, Patrick, I'm telling you, you can go to Publishers Weekly or Book List or this or that blog or this blog, and the reader review pages, they all basically have embraced, what I'm trying to do. And it's been so incredibly gratifying.
I'll bet. Yeah, but then as if that wasn't enough, you and Jim Patterson
Oh boy.
Okay, so The Horsewoman came out almost a year
January and was
January. Wow.
And was a wait a minute, wait for it. Runaway bestseller. And we have House of Wolves. We've finished 3 already together. We're finishing a 4th, plotting a 5th, and when I think I'm prolific, I got nothing on Jim. Okay. But we've got House of Wolves coming out next March. It's a Succession type family drama about this incredibly dysfunctional San Francisco family that owns a fictional football team and a newspaper, and all kinds of bad stuff happens when somebody dies in the opening chapter. And
did you pitch that idea, or was that his?
No, it's his. It was his. His mind's going a million miles an hour, and he'll come up with the ideas, and then he's the greatest outliner in the history of outliners. And then he literally 100 bullet points. It's that much. He has a way to see these novels, and then he sends them to me, and I outline him back. I say, "Oh yeah, I'll see you. You're out." But his are the Bible for these books, and then we start kicking these things back and forth. When we were out promoting Horsewoman, people say, "Well, how interviews would say, how do you guys do it? What's the what Jim calls the secret sauce?" And he said, "Well, here we'll show you. It's something we just wrote this morning." And he'd say, "Oh, say, can you see?" And I'd say, "By the dawn's early light." And they'd say, "Oh, okay, you guys came with material." And Patrick, I will tell you this seriously. He has not only become one of my best friends, it's like taking a master class in storytelling. And it's been the most fun I've ever. I got off the phone with him just a little while ago. We're kind of coming down the stretch of this new book about a woman lawyer, great defense attorney, that we want to call Jane Effing Smith. Okay, I can say that, Jane Effing Smith. And we met one day in Pleasantville near his house on the Hudson, and we just hit it off, and the rest is history. It really, it's as cool a thing that's ever happened to me at any level of my career.
Is it possible to articulate maybe how working with him how it's affected your own sense of storytelling?
Yes, yeah, 100%. I'm telling you, he is the sworn enemy of backstory and meandering. Every chapter, and again, he's, short chapters, but every chapter has to have a purpose. It has taught me to get the clutter out. Okay. And I feel like I write pretty lean stories anyway. And
that was Dutch's whole philosophy too, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. Well, lots of white. He always said he loved pages with a lot of white space. You know what he always said? Nobody ever skips dialogue, but he is a master storyteller. He's always said he imagines that he is telling his story to somebody sitting across the table from him, and he does not want them to get up. And the way he sold books proves that nobody gets up. It's been like this it's given me this incredible second wind at this stage of my dopey career.
That is so cool. Another favorite, not to talk about other writers too much, but Larry Block. Talk about a master.
Matt Scudder, those books were so inspiring and impressive to me. And he dealt with the subject of alcoholism way better than I would. I only met him one time. We were at a signing together in New York City, and I know, friends of mine know him a lot better than I do. My friend Brian Koppelman, who is, along with Dave Levine, is behind Billions and Rounders and all that stuff. I think he's quite friendly with Mr. Block, but what an impressive, incredible.
I meant to bring him up earlier when we were talking about Jesse Stone and Dix. And I was thinking about Scudder, and the Mick Ballou character. Repeats, although Ballou is certainly no therapist or a saint, but they have that sort of amazing relationship.
That late at night in the bar relationship, and Pete Hamill had a great line. He used to talk about the hour when men tell each other the truth, and that's what you're talking about with Mick Ballou, and that's Jesse and Dix and Sonny, and it's Alan Bennett, the great English playwright, once said, "The fun of being a writer is finding out that you know things that you didn't know you knew." And often in these therapy sessions in these books, I'll read it.
Breakthroughs that happen.
Huh?
There are these little mini breakthroughs that happen.
And I'll say, sometimes I actually sound like I know what I'm talking about. It's like I have this revelation.
Yeah. Just before we sign off, I'll ask some of the questions too, but can you talk about what's going on with your young adult books? I know that I think the newest one, Defending Champ, is coming out very soon, right? In
paperback
next week, maybe.
Right now, I am so jammed up in a good way, between writing the Parkers and as Jim calls himself, my living writing partner. It's going to be there's going to be a bit of time. I'm sorry to say, because those books from Travel Team on changed my life, and I had a blast writing them, and I still run into 20 somethings who want to tell me about reading Travel Team or Heat or $1 Million Throw or The Bat Boy and
Zach and Zoe.
It's
Home Team series.
No, it was the Travel Team was quite random, and we printed 20,000 copies. I thought it was 19,000 too many. In 10 days, it was #1 on the Times, chapter books bestseller list. Ended up selling 1 million copies, and When I say it changed my life, it changed the whole arc of my career.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're known, of course, as as a sports writer, and in the new book, I was thinking, wow, Lupica writing about baseball, which is such intrinsically a part of excuse me, not Larry, Bob Parker's world. There's some very poetic descriptions about baseball and how it works in our culture, et cetera.
Yeah, his descriptions in the books of Fenway Park and what it was like to be at a Red Sox game were sports writing as good as you could find in any sports section.
Yeah. A couple of questions that have come in. Let's see. Do the Jesse Stone novels need to be read in order? It's an interesting question. It could be.
Mine really don't. I mean, for people who want to have a tutorial, they can go back to the beginning and they'll see how good they were from the time Jesse comes, riding into paradise from Southern California. But yeah, I mean, they kind of do, because the Crow and Molly history, and Jesse's always referencing his ex-wife Jen, but I think you can pick up, if you haven't read another Jesse Stone, here's your poison pen money back guarantee. No, you pick up this book, you're gonna like it. You'll get a sense of who everybody is.
Well, that brings up a really interesting question for somebody like yourself. There's got to be a very delicate balance in each book with knowing just how much backstory to salt in.
Yes.
Without boring regular readers.
My brilliant editor, Danielle Dietrich, she'll take a lot out. She says, you know what, you're going to have to take some. We're going to have to take some things on faith. And no, when I'll see what she's done, she just removes stuff. She said, no, you don't need to tell them. And because here's what happens. I'm so immersed in this man's world and in his writing that I sometimes wanted to almost tell you too much about, what I know about his world.
Yeah. Let's see here. Okay, here's a nice comment. Let's see. Larry says, I so miss Mike from his early days at the Newark Star Ledger. Let's see, where did it go? I feel as connected to him as other Newark people feel about Philip Roth. Much continued success, Mike.
Patrick?
Yeah?
I never wrote for the Newark Star Ledger.
Oh, no?
Au contraire. No, I spent most of my newspaper career and am still in the New York Daily News. I've been to Newark.
Larry, the sentiment is great.
Thank you, Larry.
Got the wrong paper apparently, but
right church, wrong pew, or wrong pew. I don't know,
right.
something like that.
Let's see. Yeah, you've already answered most of these. We're talking about what is your process for writing. You've gone into that a little bit. Is there a daily word kind of count that you're looking for?
No, Bob used to talk about like 1,500 words. I'm not 12 or 1,500 words. I'm not like that. I know when I'm done for the day. I'm a morning writer. And here's the thing. And when people talk about my own productivity, I was used to writing newspaper columns that were 1,000 words long. Okay. If I write 1,000 words every day on a book, and usually I write more than that, that's 5,000. If I write every single day of the week, which I do, that's 7,000 words at the end of the week. So you do the math on that and see that it doesn't take me as long to write a book, because that output has always felt completely natural to me, but I'm like everybody else. If I don't have the time, if there's things going on in my life, if I can just move it ahead by a couple of pages, it's like maybe I don't get a first down, but I've got 3 or 4 yards and I can see the first down stake. And when I pick it up the next morning, I feel like I'm already in motion.
So does the first draft entirely go on? Is it written out in longhand, or is it every day longhand and then maybe editing as you type it?
Yeah, what I'll do is I will get as many as 50 or 60 longhand pages ahead, and then I type. But when I type, it's like a second draft. I don't, you know, like if I can, I don't know if you can see this. Okay, can you see that? There's not, you know,
Yeah.
Elmore Leonard got me to not use lined papers because he said, don't be worrying about that. You know, so sometimes I'll look at a page and there's only 10 or 12 lines, but I just think, right, with these cross the pads, and I just think better with my hand on the page. I feel like I'm more connected to my material.
Do you save your manuscript drafts, your handwritten drafts?
Much to my wife's chagrin.
Good.
Hold on, it's like show and tell. Just hold on 1 second.
All right.
Can you see this?
Yeah.
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 I've given a lot of, and I'll have like 1 through 30 tablets when I finish like a Spencer or Parker book, and I've given some of them to Boston College. I've sent a lot of my papers to my alma mater, Boston College. Yeah, I keep too much stuff. I like Elmer Leonard he'd write longhand and then he'd throw them out and type them, and then they'd be gone. I'm a hoarder that way.
So you do have the Lupica Archives.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Locker.
I've got some of my old manual typewriters and books and manuscripts and all that are at BC. So anybody's ever passing through, they'll show them to you.
Well, before we sign off, have you, I'm sure you have you taught writing before?
No, I've gone back. A couple years ago, I had as fun a week as I could ever have. I went back to Boston College and was like a writer in residence for just a week, and taught some English classes and held some informal seminars and went back and talked to the old school paper. And it was just one of the most fun things I've ever done in my life. And I keep telling myself maybe I could do it on a more permanent basis, except I'm too busy filling up these
time.
Yeah, these pads.
Well, Mike, it's been a delight having a chance to talk with you. And everybody watching, here's the new book, Robert V. Parker's Fallout. We have some signed ones left, and they're going fast.
Patrick, it was a blast to get I always love my conversations with Barbara, but to finally get an hour of one-on-one with you was
it's so much fun.
Really fun. Really fun. And so now I owe you 2 in-person events.
We've got them stacked up, 2 in-person visits, and hopefully maybe next spring when the Spencer comes out.
Well, maybe even before that. Maybe I can get Patterson to come out for House of Wolves.
You heard it here first, folks. No. Wouldn't that be fun? No, Jim's been out here a couple times.
Oh, he's the bell in person. We've done stuff together. Oh my God, it's so much fun. Oh yeah.
He's great. It's great. So much
experience. When we play golf, I'll just tell you this before we go. When we play golf together in Florida, the caddies refer to a round of golf with us as the show. They call it the show.
There's some great conversations. Yeah.
Yeah. Patrick, thank you so much. Poison Pen is one of the capitals of what we do. And anybody who knows what they're doing, and if they got a book out and they're lucky enough to get with the Poison Pen, they know what the heck they're doing.
Well, I really appreciate it, Mike. Thanks so much. And thank you all for watching online. We will be seeing you soon, Mike. And congratulations on pub date.